Hello, friends. Happy Thursday. Welcome into our members only Q&A. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being members. Appreciate you all so freaking much. I actually am going to start today with a job for you guys. That is right. As you guys, some of you may have saw today on my video, as I got to editing it, it was like kind of zooming in and out and doing some weird sort of crap. I don't know why exactly. I messed with a couple settings afterwards, not beforehand. And I think I have it figured out. I'm hoping I have it figured out. I'm using the same service to record now that I do when I record the videos. So I'm hopeful that it's over. But my job for you is if it starts doing anything weird or if it's like changing anything or whatever, just let me know, because that means I still have to fix it. And I don't want to have to mess with it anymore, hopefully. So keep me posted if there's any sort of issues with the video. That would be amazing. But thank you again for being here. We've got a lot to talk about. We'll get to as many questions as I can possibly get through. John, I'm going to read yours through like a novel, and then I'll react to as much as I can. I want to obviously give everyone an opportunity to ask questions, but I'll read all of yours first, and then we'll kind of go in what direction we want to go in. Thanks so much for doing these. These member chats are my favorite. I recommend any Packers fan to sign up. Worth it. I appreciate that, John. Will NIL and players staying longer affect the way NFL teams can draft and develop? Will we see more players ready to play as rookies? I think it doesn't really change all that much other than the fact that you may see some players stay in college a little bit longer. I think it's going to have the same effect on what teams are looking for, meaning they're ultimately probably going to want younger players with less wear and tear that they can develop on their own, kind of teach them how to do it their way. And you'll hopefully have that sort of draft and develop process, but it's just going to be dependent upon what their specific team is looking for. And at the end of the day, you're starting to try to get really good players. So whether that's somebody that's a 25-year-old 7th year senior, or like that's played for 3 or 4 different teams, whatever it might be, so be it. If that's a junior or a redshirt sophomore player who is eligible for the draft early and can come out and make an immediate impact too, they'll still be those. So I don't think it changes the calculus all that much. A theory on Goody's round 1 struggles, lots of defensive players and a lot of diamond in the rough types in the first round, but the Packers haven't had the defensive coaching staff to develop them. If you don't have good developmental coaching, you need to take more finished product types or you don't see the ROI. Now with Hafley, maybe we'll see better results. We've seen this in the 2024 class. The defensive coordinator scheme turnover also hurts. Coaches help scout, or at least help scouts know what to do or look for. When that changes, there's a personnel mismatch. More specific issue at both corner and defensive end, they seem a bit overly biased in favor of large linear athletes. So we see cornerbacks with long speed but insufficient change of direction at defensive ends who can bull rush but not run the loop, spin, or otherwise beat offensive tackles. So we'll go with those. First of all, that's a thing that happens everywhere. In fact, I would say that Green Bay does a better job of it in looking for players who are adaptable to a variety of schemes, period, that can play in a 4-3, a 3-4, and have that versatility. I mean, I don't think any team values versatility as much as Green Bay, quite frankly. So yes, you can make an argument that changing into this Jeff Hafley defense has been a challenge for some of these players, but there really wasn't anyone that was a complete, like, oh my God, they don't fit in this defense at all. What are we going to do with this player? Wasn't really anyone like that. And a large part of that is due to them finding players who are adaptable to different schemes and do have a lot of that versatility. Same thing goes on offense. And Goody's talked about that in the past, where they will target some specific players. And I think the big defensive ends are a great example of what Mike Pettin and Joe Barry were looking for. And it might be a little bit different in Jeff Hafley's scheme, but it certainly wasn't that Preston Smith or Rashawn Gary or Enigbare or LVN could not play 4-3 defensive end. They have every right to. In fact, Rashawn Gary and LVN are pretty much ideal fits for a 4-3. So I don't think there's been too much of that. I do agree overall with sort of your assessment when it comes to draft and develop. I don't think it's necessarily to do with the coaches or developmental coaching as much as it is with the CBA. And there's just not a lot of time. And you have to remember too, like these coaches, especially from a head coaching standpoint, your time during the week for these guys that even are practicing, it is primarily going to be setting you up for the next game. It's a lot of scheme work. It's a lot of game planning. It's a lot of putting that playbook into action. Like you've got to get ready for that next opponent. I mean, your Monday through Friday, or your Mondays, kind of breaking down tape from the previous opponent and then immediately transitioning to the next opponent. If you think they're spending a huge chunk of the week on just like individual trait development, it's not. There's so much game planning and scheming that's going on that you get so much of that. So it's not just the fact that, developmental coaches or things like that, but it's that all of this time is going into getting you ready for the next opponent. And quite frankly, you have to, because if you don't do that, well, you're going to be at a huge disadvantage because the other team's doing that against you. And they're scouting and preparing specifically for you. If you're just working on your craft, yes, there's going to be some dividends that pay over time because you're constantly working on getting better as football players. But it's going to be really hard to beat that opponent this week because they've spent the whole week studying and getting ready for you. And you've just been working on one aspect of your game. And it's really difficult to do that. So I think the CBA plays a huge role in that as well. Did you see Christian's dad, Tazim, said that he and his son are Packers for life, even if he goes to another team? Maybe he gives Packers a bit of a discount. More likely he'll come back in 2026. Yeah, those are good things to say. I mean, Tazim was a Packer, obviously. So I think what I would take this as is they're going to have Packers in their DNA forever. Tazim was a Packer. Christian was a Packer. I mean, that's a pretty special bond, right? Imagine like you and your kid both get to play for the same team in the NFL. I mean, that's like a dream scenario, right? So pretty cool there. So I think it more just means that they'll have Packers in their DNA forever. I don't think it's going to change the calculus on taking a discount or anything like that. And as far as whether he's back in 2026, I think only time's going to tell on that. Yeah, maybe at some point I would get him on, but I don't see that happening necessarily anytime soon. All right. The saddest part of the 2024 season for me were the Jair and Watson injuries, maybe the end of the Jair and Watson, not likely to play much in 2025. With them and Elton, I think the Pack beat the Eagles. Yeah, it could have been the case. Injuries are always there. They're always going to be prevalent. They're never an excuse. You got to find a way to overcome it. But definitely the Jair situation and injuries, the Watson injury, Elton in the game, other injuries that happened in the game. Excuse me. I think that's probably only like I don't think I've sneezed more than maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5 times on camera ever. I want to say it's probably in the 2 or 3 range. So a very rare occurrence. You're very welcome. Excuse me though. Yeah, I think that certainly would have helped, obviously, having all of those guys available in that game, but you got to find a way to win. And I mean, if you were to ask me what beat the Packers, was it them not playing up to their standard or was it the injuries? To me, it was far more of them not playing up to their standard. That was the bigger reason that they didn't win that game, but injuries certainly did not help. All right. Snoop Robbie Rob. According to PFF, LVN had the league's 3rd lowest run defense grade among edges with 400 snaps at 45.2. You've implied that he was much better than that. Would you say in your eyes he was a 60? Yeah, I would probably put him a little bit more in that range. And here's what I want to say. I wouldn't argue that he's like this dominant edge setting defensive end, right? I do think he took a pretty solid step this past year. I'll just say it this way. The 45.2 is pretty stunning to me, to be honest. That seems very, very low. What I specifically recognized was there was a lot of times on tape in 2023 where LVN would get completely out of place and really sort of the eye candy and the orbits and the motions and the play actions and everything like that would really have him like just his head swimming. And he would abandon his role a lot of times, especially on reverses. There's going to be something that looks like a sweep or a stretch play, and he's just going to crash down. And all of a sudden it's a reverse and he's in no man's land to make the play. That was 2023. In 2024, I thought he did a significantly better job in staying home, playing his assignment, holding up at the point of attack. I didn't see him get abused on double teams as much in 2024. So I thought there was a much better effort. I thought there was a much better intentionality to what he was doing. Again, am I ready to like crown him as this premier run defender? No, but 45.2 seems very, very low. I would have probably, if you would have asked me what I thought it was going to be at. In fact, the funny thing is, Snoop Robbie Rob, when I was reading it, I was assuming this was going to be his pass rush grade. So I thought you were going to say had the league's 3rd lowest pass rush rate among edges with 400 snaps. So yeah, I'm very, very surprised that it was that low. I thought it was definitely better than that. The edge rushers the Packers have drafted since Clay are rough. I don't think it's just a Goot issue, but philosophical issue passed on that Goot needs to adjust. We kind of talked about this a little bit with John, Troy, and the fact that there was a specific type of edge rusher that Mike Pettin and Joe Barry had wanted, kind of those more big physical. And, they wanted them to be able to be these physical edge setting defensive ends. So it changes the calculus, or I guess outside linebackers at the time. It changes what you're sort of looking for in those situations. What I'm very intrigued by is now that Jeff Hafley's on defense, we have not seen Green Bay draft a defensive tackle or a defensive end or really a corner outside of Kalen King at the end of the 7th round, which really doesn't tell us anything. We really haven't seen them draft those 3 positions in the Jeff Hafley era. They drafted linebacker and Edgerrin Cooper. They drafted a massive butt ton of safeties this past year. But other than that, they didn't really address anything on defensive line or at corner, again, outside of Kalen King. So I think we're going to finally get probably a glimpse of, do they go with a little bit of a faster, more agile defensive end? What are they looking for at defensive tackle? What are they looking for at corner? I think we're going to get a better indicator of that in this upcoming draft. And we'll see if they change the type up a little bit, or maybe they don't. Maybe it's the same kind of players that they've looked for during this past time. And then, I think one of the things that you have to remember is, and it kind of goes to what I talk about in a variety of different topics, is we all want the edge defender who can get 18 sacks or a ton of pressures and hold up against the run and be great in all phases. Yeah, that'd be amazing. There's not many of those that exist. And when you get them, you're paying them at a very, 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 very high level. If what it seemed like is, Mike Pettin and Joe Barry really wanted the big run defending, sort of edge setting and pocket collapsing defensive ends that could collapse the pocket around the quarterback and then also set the edge against the run. Now, there were deficiencies in that. It didn't work great, but that's the style that they wanted to go with, understanding that, hey, you might not be able to have your cake and eat it too. You're not only going to get so many opportunities. And when you do have an opportunity at a TJ Watt, I don't know, maybe pull the trigger on it, but you only get so many opportunities for those type of players. And when you get them, hold on to them, but they're hard to come by. So you're sometimes living in a world of, do we want to focus on the bigger, stronger run defenders, or do we want to focus on the more Hassan Reddick, Nolan Smith, bendier, Brian Burns-ish sort of pass rushers? And those guys are great against the pass rush, but they're not going to hold up against the run as well. So I don't hate hey, let's go get a big physical defensive end who, like Jared Verse is more of that style, right? Good run defender, and then can power rush you into the quarterback, but he's very, very successful at it at the same time. Again, there's no perfect formula here. There's not a one size fits all. You got to be able to go out and find the type of defensive end / edge rusher that you want and have success with it. But I do agree, Troy, that they've struggled to find those premium players really since Clay Matthews at edge, at least. Mirko, how much money could the Packers realistically spend in free agency without borrowing too much from the future? I think what you're probably looking at here is something very similar to last offseason without really borrowing anything from, future, having to do a bunch of restructures or anything like that. I think they can spend probably in that 30 million-ish range, 30 mil like per year sort of contracts with like 2 kind of bigger free agents, or if they wanted to, maybe 1 massive free agent. But I think you're probably looking at, maybe a really good defensive tackle or a defensive end and a really good corner, something in that range. Maybe not the top end premium level, but maybe 18 mil per year on a defensive lineman, 12 mil per year on a corner. I think that somewhere in that range kind of feels about right on like 3 to 4, probably like 4-year deals on each of them. It could be an offensive lineman instead. Could be a whatever, right? Could be a Khalil Mack and a Drew Dahlman. Could be a Milton Williams and a, Byron Murphy. Who knows? But something in that range I could see happening. And I think two pretty sizable free agent signings is what they can do. And then after that, you can of course always do your 1 year, 2 to 3 million kind of guys, and it's not going to matter all that much. But 2 big time free agents, I think, is what you're probably looking at. Are coaches allowed to actively apply for open positions, or do they have to get invited by the hiring organization? Well, it depends on how the organization runs things. Usually it's kind of like a invite thing of, we want you to apply, but there's usually a methodology to it. Like, if I were to guess, I don't know that Jeff Hafley, or like that the Packers went to Jeff Hafley last year. My guess is Jeff Hafley expressed interest in that position in some way and had his agent get in touch with the Packers and say, hey, my client, Jeff Hafley, would like to interview with Green Bay. Or maybe they, in Hafley's case, he knows Saleh, who knows LaFleur, and they probably had a text message, right? So Jeff Hafley might have just texted and said, "Hey, I'm really, really interested in this job. Would love an interview if you would have me." Something like that. It just depends. These are very tight knit groups, and there's a very small circle of coaches in the NFL and even in college, right? That kind of all know each other in some capacity. And a lot of these times too, you're seeing more and more of how a lot of these coaches are in the same have the same agents. And it's actually getting to be a bit of a problem. And the NFL's actually put out memos in regards to like, hey, we don't want you building your entire organization based off of one agency. I think Trace Armstrong and his agency has kind of been one of the ones that's kind of been doing this, where you end up with a lot of, front office coaches and players that are all under the same umbrella and the same agency. And that's really not the way that you want things done. But it can all vary position by position. It can all vary organization by organization. But it can happen in a variety of different ways. Just kind of depends. But yeah, I'm sure that there's ways that if you were a coach, if you were Jeff Hafley and you didn't have a number, or there wasn't a place to apply, like it's not on LinkedIn exactly, right? So you would have your agent get in touch with the organization and say, "Hey, we have major interest. Can we set up an interview?" And then they would say yes or no and kind of go from there. Who do you think takes the biggest step on the D line next year, even if it's just based on vibe or a guess? I'm going to say that I don't know if you want to call this like biggest step, so to say. I bet the player who plays better in the most significant way next year is Kenny Clark. I would put money on that. I think that Kenny had a down year this year. I think his first year in a new system really affected him. And I didn't think we saw the same level of Kenny Clark. And there's a real world in which that's just Kenny now. He's played a lot of snaps in the NFL. There's a lot of wear and tear. And maybe that just is who he is. In no other year has he shown anything like that. And if I were willing to bet, I bet he's going to be motivated for next year, coming in fresh, ready to go. And I bet Kenny is the most improved defensive lineman from this year into next year. I don't know if that, it's not exactly a breakout candidate, right? But coming off a poor year, I bet Kenny makes a big time impact and a big time improvement in 2025. Did Matt coach Mannion in LA? Maybe that's where, yes, they had a connection from the time with the Rams. Absolutely. This isn't really a question to you as much as it is to others for my curiosity. Everyone says "Go Pack Go" out loud in response to Andy, Perry, and Maggie, right? I hope so. Like, yeah, say it out loud. Join in on the fun. I love when, I do Perry and Grant, and, we do it at the end. And I say "Go Pack Go," and then Perry says "Go Pack Go." And I think sometimes Grant says "Go Pack Go." Alex, I think, used to say it, or no, he said "Go Pack." But yeah, I love that stuff. So I'm glad you're enjoying it. I love you're saying it at home as well. Any thoughts on DeMarcus Covington? Yeah, at first glance, really, really like the hire. Really, really like the hire. I always love when you get somebody, if you're hiring a coordinator and they've had head coaching experience, if you're hiring a position coach and they've had coordinator experience, like that they've already been at that level. I love that. He's had some really good defensive lines in his time with the Patriots. I love the fact that he's been under Bill Belichick, one of the greatest defensive minds in the history of the game. I love that. And here's the other thing that I love, right? He made, in 2012, which is still, it's a hot second ago, right? It's not like it was yesterday, right? But, 13 years ago-ish, not even probably, because it's probably midway through 2012, but he started as a defensive grad assistant at UAB. All right. Does another grad assistant at Ole Miss, but in 1 year, he goes from UAB to Ole Miss, which is a pretty big promotion. Then he goes from a grad assistant to a defensive line coach by 2015 already. So he goes to UT Martin as a defensive line coach. Then after 1 year, he immediately gets another promotion to Eastern Illinois, where he's co-defensive coordinator and defensive line coach. Then in 1 year later, he makes the jump to the NFL and spends 2 years as a coaching assistant in New England, immediately gets a promotion to outside linebackers coach, makes a transition for 3 years to defensive line coach, and immediately gets a promotion to defensive coordinator. So the fact that, this is the first time ever, by the way, the first time ever that DeMarcus Covington in his entire coaching career has actually taken a step back going from defensive coordinator to defensive line coach. I mean, based on the rest of his trajectory, I would have expected him to be a head coach somewhere this year. But the fact that he went from a grad assistant at UAB in 2012 to a defensive coordinator with the Patriots by 2024 and constantly promoting up and getting better and better and better opportunities just shows that like how driven he is in his career. He's still only 35 years old. He turns 36 in March. And I love the fact that they're bringing a young, energetic coach into that room and is going to give them some new things to look at. And I know a lot of people have already been commenting from the Patriots organization of how smart this dude is, how he could coach any position group on any team. I really, really like it. And again, the fact that the Belichick connection, defensive coordinator, all of it, I'm all over it. And we'll see if they lose Campanelli. There was a report from Silverstein today that Campanelli is one of the leaders for that defensive coordinator position. That would be a big loss, but you love having these potential coordinators within your organization. And now, Covington, in Campanelli, in the secondaries coach, whose name is escaping me at the moment. It's really going to bother me. Packers coach, Packers defensive passing game coordinator. Ansley. Anyway, I thought of it literally as I typed it. But anyway, Derek Ansley, passing game coordinator, like he's a potential future defensive coordinator. So if you ever do lose Hafley, like right now, the fact that you've got these three, potential candidates right on your staff already, you love to have that. And just, again, a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, a lot of smart dudes in that room. Very much a fan of everything that I've read so far about it. Ben is in the bring back Tay group as long as he wants to and doesn't want to break the bank to do it. I agree with you. One of my favorite players to watch of all time. Here are the two questions that I would ask Davante that would give me everything that I would need to know if I were the Packers as to whether or not I want to bring him back. The first question is, do you want to be back in Green Bay? And if there's hesitation, if he's like, I'm not totally sure, I think it could work. Nope, I'm good. I want him to some extent to want to be back in Green Bay. I'm not saying it has to be his number one choice, but I want him to have legitimate, I want to be there. If that's the case, that's a really good start. The second one is, what are your expectations for your role in Green Bay? And if he says, my expectation is I'm the number one guy, I want 10 to 12 targets per game. I want to be the guy that's focused in on I'm good. I probably don't want to go in that direction. I want him to come to the conclusion of hey, I think I can still be a primary target in this offense, but I understand that you guys have Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed and Josh Jacobs and Tucker Kraft, and I want to be a piece of that offense. I'm not going to be somebody that's going to need, 15 targets a game. I want to play within the scheme of the offense. If I'm open, I want to see the ball. And my expectation for me personally is I'm going to go out and be that number one guy. But I understand that there's going to be times that I'm going to get 4 targets in a game. I understand there's going to be times where I get 16 targets in a game, but I'm cool with that. I'm going to block on the outside. I'm going to do what I need to do. If those 2 boxes are checked, I don't know how I could be anything except all in. But if he's hesitant on wanting to be here, if he's hesitant on, or if it's demanding that he's going to get X amount of targets per game, it's probably not the right situation, right? But overall, I feel good about bringing him back, and I think he would fit in really, really well. And we'll just see if Green Bay has any actual interest in doing it or not. Now we have a couple of openings filled. What can we expect, or when can we expect the coaching breakdowns? So here's the thing. I'll talk about it tomorrow for sure. It's kind of a perfect one because I don't know, again, assuming that I get to it tonight, I don't think I'm going to have 30 minutes to talk just about T. Higgins, right? So my guess is we can kind of talk about the coaches first and then Higgins. But this is one of those things where there's only so much I can tell you, right? I've never been in a room with Covington to see how he coaches. There's been some great articles by Paul Brettel, Rob I think it was Domofsky, Bill Huber, that are already kind of covering, just some of the things that are known about Covington throughout the league. So we'll go through all of that and we'll try to break it down as best as possible. But yeah, I unfortunately have no all 22 tape of Covington to kind of be able to break him down. I almost said Robert Covington, forward for the 76ers, but DeMarcus Covington, a mix of DeMarcus Cousins and Robert Covington is who they have as their new coach in Green Bay. But we'll touch base on it tomorrow for sure. They should look at Dre Greenlaw, but they won't. They should not look at Dre Greenlaw, and they will not. It's my response. Dre Greenlaw is great, but he's already had a major injury. He's just coming back from that injury. He's on the downswing of his career. that's not somebody that I would have a ton of interest in bringing into Green Bay. I love the intensity. I love the way that he plays. I think he would bring bring a big presence. But even if you bring in Greenlaw, Quay and Cooper are going to be your primary 2 linebackers. So you're going to overpay for a guy that's going to be your number 3. That's also going to block Tyron Hopper from potentially playing and hopefully getting better. And you're paying a huge contract of a position that's certainly not one of your biggest needs. And that's going to take away from you being able to give a big contract to maybe a corner, a defensive end, a pass rusher, or a defensive tackle, wide receiver, offensive lineman. It's going to take away from that as well. So really good player. I don't think this is the right time of his career. I don't think it's the right stage of his career. I don't think he's the right player to add based on what Green Bay's needs currently are. So no, I'd be pretty heavily against giving a major contract to Dre Greenlaw at this point, based on what the needs are and based on, just his status right now. Let's get those likes up, guys. Appreciate that. King Kermit. How much influence does Jordan Love have on re-signing a teammate like Josh Myers? If they have a strong bond, is it worth them to keep him? Or is he a closer bond between Watson or Dobbs? Yeah, I think that you want to talk to your quarterback. And I think that was one of the things that Rodgers was probably kind of talking about, of like, hey guys, I don't need to be the deciding factor here, but before you make a decision, like, can you kind of like at least humor me, right? I last year, I talk about youth sports from time to time. I was coaching a soccer team, and there were tryouts for the team. And I didn't know for a bit, because I was the coach of the team prior. I didn't know for a bit if they were going to actually ask what my opinion was on it, which would have been absurd because I had coached all of these boys for a really long period of time. And they did eventually. So just to be clear, but for a while, it was like, it didn't seem like they were even going to like get my input. And at the time, I'm just like, I don't necessarily care if you use my input, but at least humor me in the fact that you think my input is important in the conversation. And even like in that moment, I would have felt, kind of fairly disrespected if, after me coaching these kids for so long, if my opinion didn't even matter, like in a little bit, it would have been like, all right, I guess, like, I know these players better than anybody, but you don't even want to know. I would have felt offended by that in some regard. And I think from, what Aaron was kind of saying is like, hey, I don't need to be the deciding factor here. That's your job. You can make the deciding factor, but it kind of feels like you're maybe not doing your job, or, at least it kind of seems disrespectful if the person who's around these guys every day, and the one that's going to be throwing them the football, and the one that has these connections with these players, or the one that's literally, touching his ass every single day, like, maybe you at least want to just at least humor me by asking what I think. If I say like, hey, I really like Josh, and I think you should bring him back, and you don't bring him back, and maybe you just have a quick conversation and say, hey, we really wanted Josh, just the price point didn't fit. Cool. You asked my opinion. I said, hey, I think we should bring him back. You couldn't make it work from a financial standpoint. Totally get it. No harm, no foul. I'm glad we had this conversation. Thank you so much for including me in that conversation. I feel probably pretty great about it. Do you, as a GM, just want to go to Jordan and say, hey, do you want Josh back? And he says, yeah, absolutely want Josh back. All right, Josh, you're back. 12 mil per year. Jordan wants you back. No, you don't want to do that either. You have to be the GM. You have to be the one that's ultimately making those determinations and those decisions. So I think it's really, really good to have those conversations, that open line of communication. And I think that's what got Aaron kind of peeved at times, of like, oh, you just cut Jake Kumaro. And like, it went as this like really petty thing, because it's like Jake Coomer, like, really, he was going to be the 6th wide receiver, probably never active. It was probably never going to be anything anyway. But it had more to do with this idea of, it's not Jake Coomer. It's just like, could you have asked? Could you have said like, hey, what do you think about Jake? And then I get to tell you. And then if you need to move on, you need to move on. But I think that's what he's kind of looking for. So if I were Jordan, and if I were Goody, I would absolutely want to be having those conversations with Jordan. If I were Jordan, I would at least want the courtesy of like, hey, what do you think? And then go do what you want. So that's where I'd be kind of with it. But it shouldn't be, maybe it's a tiebreaker, right? Or maybe it's like we're on the fence of whether or not we should or shouldn't. All right, what does Jordan think? Again, all right, Jordan loves it, or like Jordan's like, hey, whatever you guys decide. There can be a difference there. So it should be noteworthy, but not the main deciding factor. Kind of curious to see what a Sean Ryan mentality can do at center, though. I'm really interested to see if that ends up coming to fruition. I think there's a real chance that he could end up in that spot. It could be Jenkins. It could be somebody new. It could be Jacob Monk. If you were to sort of put odds out there right now between Monk, Ryan, Jenkins, and Myers and somebody totally different, man, that'd be a really fun, interesting poll. I don't know what I would vote in that one. I kind of lean Jenkins a little bit, that I think it might be him, but I don't know. I'm very intrigued just to see how the line is going to look, who they bring in. If they bring Myers back, then we know the answer, but I'm intrigued by all of it. I hope they kind of go in a different direction. I'd be intrigued by Jenkins. I'd be intrigued by Sean Ryan. I still think Drew Dahlman is somebody that they should probably look a little bit at too, but we'll see what they end up doing. King Kermit, I am doing fantastic. A little bit tired, but fantastic. Love the Ross content to come. You give any look yourself into the Senior Bowl prospects. Mike Green's bull rush was insane. I was actually on the Bleacher Report live chat today. If you guys haven't checked that out, 3 p.m. to 3:30 p.m., 30 minutes every single day, Monday through Thursday, not Fridays, but Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Central on Bleacher Report. I'm doing a live chat just like this. And somebody asked me about Mike Green, and I haven't watched him yet. Now, I can't post the all 22 in the Bleacher Report, videos. But I'm like, let me just pull some stuff up because I hadn't had a chance to watch him too much. And I just watched, probably like 15 plays and just reacted to him live on camera. It was a lot of fun. I really liked it. He's a really, really fun player. I think he would be a change of pace from Gary and from Enigbari and from LVN, etc. So I think he's really, really fun. I don't know if he gets to 23, but as I kind of always talk about, we'll get through this free agency these next couple weeks, and then I will dive headfirst into the draft. But yeah, I watched a little bit of Mike Green. Really, really fun player. Now it was against Stony Brook, I think was his first game. So take that for what it's worth. But the tape was really fun, and obviously that play at the Senior Bowl this week was phenomenal. If Andy were suddenly hired by Green Bay and Goody gave you an assistant to give them a presentation or an assignment to give them a presentation on how they should go about adding more really, really good elite players, what would you present? Yeah. I don't think I could bring anything to the table, Alex, if I'm being totally honest. We talked about it on today's show. I think Goody is doing really all the right things that he should be. I love the formula. I love the design. I love looking at I love looking at the premium athletes and kind of narrowing that funnel down with keeping a few exceptions here and there within that funnel. I love taking the deep dive scouting stance at it and seeing with those in the funnel, which ones are going to be the best ones to succeed. What I think I would do, I don't think I could do it with the presentation. I think, what I'm hoping that they're doing is taking a look at why did they go with Stokes, LVN, Wyatt, Walker? What were the decisions there? Why did they come to that conclusion? And what did they kind of get wrong? And what could they have done better? And I can tell you wholeheartedly, this is stuff that GMs go through all the time. I can tell you wholeheartedly, this is stuff that GMs think of all the time. Goody will have thought, he may not say it in like a press conference or anything. He will have gone through every possible scenario in his head of what he could have done, what he should have done, what they could have done different organizationally, whether they should have taken Brian Burns or Montez Sweat instead of Rashawn Gary. He has played through every single one of those scenarios in his head a billion times. It is impossible not to. And trust me, it stings. It stings when you don't get the guy or that a guy right ahead of you. Yeah. And here's the other thing too, right? LVN Christian Gonzalez. I would be willing to bet you a immense amount of money that there were probably scouts or coaches within the organization that said, you got to take Christian Gonzalez. Now there were others and probably more that said, you got to take LVN, but I guarantee you there was scouts, higher ups, coaches in that organization, probably the secondary coach, right? Saying, pounding the table for Christian Gonzalez. And they probably had, and I could be wrong, that maybe they had Christian Gonzalez off their board for some reason or whatever the case may be, but you get my point here. Maybe it was a different player that ended up succeeding later. There'll be players that were saying, hey, you got to go get this guy. And they went with the other one. And trust me when I say that happens to every single organization, every single draft. It's not going to be perfect, but they need to figure out a way to lock in on those first day prospects and really find some home runs, because even some triples and doubles at this point. A lot of errors, a lot of strikeouts, a lot of maybe a walk here or there, but they need to have more efficiency with it. But Alex, if I went and said to Goody, hey, you should do this, he'd be like, oh, you think, yeah, like we never thought of that. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. They're leap years ahead. They're leap years ahead. I did an article. I'm going to see if I can pull it up really here. I can never find it, which is very, very frustrating. And just try one other thing really quick. All right. So if I go to my profile, I should be able to see everything I've ever done. How have I had 34 pages of stuff that I wrote for Packer Report? That seems crazy. All right. I don't know if I'm going to find this in time. I'm going to give it a couple more. Here it is. All right. I wrote an article April 7th. I'll put it in chat, of 2020. There you go. Things NFL teams know that we don't. All right. The premise of this article was, we get all excited about drafts, right? And we look at some tape or whatever. And here one of my first paragraphs here was, the truth is, even the most advanced NFL draft experts know a small sliver of what NFL teams know going into the draft. Sure, there are those in the media that have connections to NFL teams. There are experts out there that are doing tremendous work on NFL draft analytics. There are some incredibly knowledgeable professionals who can break down the tape, as well as some of the best NFL scouts. And there are even those within the media that are so well informed that they can actually get a pulse on what some teams are going to do in the draft. All of those things are true, but even if you were to pull all of that knowledge together into one usable database, that information is incredibly far from complete. And here's what NFL teams know that we don't. First one is background information. Like, they spend so much time getting to know these players, their families, their friends, the bartender that serves them drinks on Friday nights. Like, they go into full character building reports as to who these players are and whether or not they're likely or not to be able to be motivated in football, to reach their potential, how much they care about the game, what they do off the field, what they do on the field. The background information is insane. Scheme fit. So many of these NFL, like, you take a Daniel Jeremiah, right? Or someone who's unbelievable. Love Daniel Jeremiah, but he has to put together a big board for everyone. That big board is going to be full of players that he thinks are the top 50 players in the draft, but it's not for a specific team. Every team has their own scheme. Every team has their own height, weight, speed thresholds that they potentially look at. Like, every team builds their players and their boards and their organization differently. So we might look at a player that we love, but Green Bay's never going to take him because he doesn't fit what they're looking for. So scheme fit's a big one. Analytics is getting better from a draft standpoint. The NFL is like, what we're seeing now on the internet and Twitter for like a draft analytics stuff is what teams were doing probably 4, 5, 6 years ago. Locker room fit. Again, that background information, how they fit in the locker room. Teams care about that, know well more about it than what we do. Positional depth. It's something that, again, each team is going to care about a little bit differently, is their depth at a given position. Draft philosophy and thresholds, which we talk about with Green Bay all the time. More exposure and better film. This one's closed. All right. Better film, at least. Back in 2020, nobody had really any all 22 for college. We were all going off game tape for the most part. There are a few exceptions. Now, a lot of people can get, I know I can get all 22 of any player at any time, every game. So it's not as hard anymore. But back in the day, they had a lot more access to it. But from an NFL standpoint, they've been watching these players for 4 years. They've been watching these guys since they've been coming out of high school. Like, we get, I start watching these draft prospects in like early February, and I get from early February to April to try to cover what I usually try to get the top 100, top 150 to know really well, like really well. And I'm really proud of the work that I do. They have started scouting these top 500 players, for years now. Like they are well ahead of us. Like they've had years to look at these players. I've had 2 months to look at 150. Like, there's a difference there. Injury concerns. There will be players that are just completely off of Green Bay's board because of potential injury issues. Just their experience, right? Like I've been watching tape on players for a while. There will be scouts that have been hardcore scouting for 20, 25, 30 years within organizations. Like the stuff that they know of what to avoid, what to look for is uncanny and is really going to help them. And sometimes you maybe not, can't see the forest through the trees at times, but man, that experience is going to pay off far more often than not. They have a whole list of historical data and trends that help them make these decisions. They also have the knowledge of the 2026 NFL draft. So they might be less likely to take one of these players now. Like they might not want a, tight end, a developmental tight end in the 4th round because they know that next year is one of the deepest tight end drafts in NFL history. That's probably not the case, but you get my point. They're already looking ahead to 2026 prospects and where some of the depth of 2026 draft is. They also are looking at their future needs. A lot of people are looking at it and looking at, well, Green Bay right now needs a corner, a pass rusher, an offensive lineman, and a wide receiver. What Goody's looking at is, what do we need 2-3 years from now? And we might look at that a little bit, but trust me, Goody's far more aware of where those holes are, not just right now. That's what you want to usually use free agency for, but what holes are coming down the road, which is generally more what you're using the draft for. Positional value is something that's going to matter a ton. Positional depth is something that's going to matter a ton. So again, if you have like a really strong tight end class, like there was a couple of years ago, Green Bay felt strong about that, and they go and get Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft in the same draft. Or they know that that's the time to attack that position group. So, man, these NFL teams and what we know from a draft standpoint, and sorry to kind of spend a lot of time on this one, but we're just sort of getting a small glimpse by taking a look at some of the all 22 on some of these players. And it's a really fun process and it's great information. And there's a lot of great stuff that's out there. Man, NFL teams have a trillion times more than what we do. And the gap closes a tiny bit every single year, but it's still not remotely close. So there's nothing that I could tell Goody that he doesn't already know. Also, a Detroit friend of mine is bummed out and doesn't have any faith in the new coordinators. Not that that means anything. Yeah, I think overall they did a pretty decent job. I think when you're Detroit and you're in that situation, you're probably looking as a fan of like, oh, they could have their pick of anyone that they want. But man, if I were a Detroit fan, I would say, hey, you probably want to trust Dan Campbell. He's done a really good job of building those staffs over the years. Andy, how's your day? Am I the only Packer fan that hates other Packer fans? I spent an hour yesterday arguing with this guy saying that we should start Malik over Jordan. I appreciate the question, Ian. My day's going great. I think you just have to sort of pick and choose your battles, right? What I would tell you, Ian, and I think some of the things there's sometimes what I have to remind myself as well, is we are all in different versions of our fandom. I tell this story from time to time. When I was a kid, and it doesn't just necessarily mean that I was like this dumb kid, so like people that think this way are stupid, but when I was a kid, I wanted Green Bay to win everything. If there was a preseason game, my expectation going into that game was that was a real game and we are playing to win that freaking game. If there was a Packer player in the Pro Bowl, man, the NFC team better play to win. And I wanted that player to play out of his mind in that Pro Bowl. Like I want every single time there was a player with a G on their helmet. I was all in. They needed to win that. And I was sitting in front of my TV like my life depended on it. And if it didn't go right, I was usually pretty pissed off after the fact. Then there was a time, where it evolved, to something different. And it wasn't necessarily that. I understood preseason Pro Bowl probably don't matter. But I mean, I would get upset. Like if I was watching a regular season game and my dad came down and was like, man, the Packers aren't really playing well. I would just like, get the out of here. I don't want to just get out of here. I don't want to hear it. Right. Like every play, every single play was life or death. Like I needed them to be successful on every down, every distance, all the time. It was a very different experience. Now, as I've gone on, I care less even about wins and losses in the regular season and more about growth, how they're kind of projecting through the course of the season, how they're progressing through the course of the season, and more keeping an eye on the big picture. And it's less about the down to down. It's less about the game to game and more about what they're going to be come January and hopefully February. And now obviously it's a completely, totally different analytical approach that I have. And I take a deep dive into everything and I can't turn that off anymore. So there's been very different versions of fan Andy through the course of the all time, right? Like, third grade Andy and today's Andy wouldn't even be able to talk football with one another. I think that Andy would hate me. I think I would hate that Andy. They're two totally different people on two totally different wavelengths of the fan spectrum. And the beautiful thing is that what I would say, Ian, just for you being here, right? I'm going to guess that you're a very passionate Packer fan. I would be willing to bet you the guy that's spending an hour arguing with you that Malik Willis is the rightful quarterback in Green Bay, the fact that he's spending an hour arguing with you about it probably tells me that he's a pretty passionate Packer fan. That's a great place to be in. I love passionate Packer fans. I have a job because of passionate Packers fans, right? And I get that sometimes some takes are really freaking annoying and it's frustrating. And the immediate visceral reaction after every single game of, fire him, cut him. This guy effing sucks. Don't want it. This team is the dumbest team that it's like, holy crap, guys. Like, are we even having fun anymore? If like every single game that goes slightly wrong, we need to nuke everything into oblivion. So I get it. I love the passion. I love the passion that everyone has for this team. I love that everyone wants to see this team win and succeed at a very high level. But I need to remind myself sometimes of that. We're all on a little bit of a different wavelength and journey with the team. And we're all at a different, point of our fandom. And most people aren't going to, and I'm not saying right now I'm better by any means. I'm not saying I'm better than anyone at all. Not what I'm saying at all. But most people are never going to get to this sort of, level or like just different version of thinking that I'm at because I'm so deep in the weeds with everything. And again, I don't even think that that's necessarily better. That's just different than what other people are going through and how they're viewing the game. And for them, a lot of people are in that phase of every play, every game is life or death. And if you say one thing that I don't even want to hear, just get out of my life. And yeah, it's time to go to Ty Detmer instead of Brett Favre. I want Ty Detmer out there. Something I said at a time because I was passionate about it. Screw Brett. He just threw 3 interceptions in the game. Give me Ty Detmer. And somebody that was, not doing a podcast at the time, but in the media at the time, probably would have said, hold up. Brett is this. Ty is this. You don't want to go to Ty Detmer. But Ty had this good game in the preseason. Okay. But this guy is so much more immensely talented at the position. You should probably stick with that Brett Favre guy. So again, what I would stress, Ian, is that find the common ground. We all love the Packers. We're all passionate about the Packers. That's a great place to be in. And this is all supposed to be entertainment at the end of the day. We have enough serious crap going on out there, right? That's not fun that we're here because we want to avoid that. Get out of that realm and just take, whether it's 48 minutes on a chat and a Q&A just to talk Packers, we want to be there. If we get to here and we are just fighting and Malik Willis, Jordan Love, you suck, I suck, everyone sucks, that takes away from the whole reason why we're probably wanting to do this in the first place, to have fun, to engage with one another, and to avoid all the messy stuff in life. If all we care about is the drama that happens within this, then we need a different escape altogether. And I don't know where to go from there, because then that probably becomes filled with drama. So try to just have fun with it. See where the common denominators are, right? Where like, all right, maybe you disagree with the quarterback, but maybe you both love Edgerrin Cooper. So maybe let's talk linebacker play instead, right? And just remember that everyone's at a little different place with their fandom, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. And everyone's has a different level of, sort of education's the wrong word, but just of knowledge of where they're at. I'll end with this for this question, is that one of the hardest things for me to do in my day-to-day life is when somebody comes up and asks me, like, just randomly, or like a friend of a friend, or if I'm at a party and they start talking Packers with me, you might say, that doesn't make any sense. You talk Packers all the time. What do you mean? There is that feeling out process of like, what can I give you? What level are we at here? If so, it's like if I start talking, scheme and who's doing what and going into huge details with X's and O's, I might this person might be like, oh God, what just happened? Right. And I've had it too, where because usually I'll kind of give like a test to be like, just to kind of gauge like, where are we at from a fan standpoint here? Where are we at from a knowledge standpoint of like, what wavelength do we want to be on? And then I have to kind of get on that wavelength of like, all right, we're just going to have a very kind of surface level Packers conversation. Other times, like when I'm talking Justice, Ben Fennell, things like that, I have to try to get to their level, because they do a little bit more X's and O's work than even that I get to do from time to time, right? And there are other people that they're probably dumbing stuff down for me from time to time. So you just have to kind of, when you're having those conversations, you have to figure out of like, what's our level here of like, and it's just different. It's not better or worse. It's just different. So yeah, I would just try to have fun with it, find a common ground, and just appreciate the passion and that we're all in a little bit of a different wavelength there. All right. Thoughts on the Covington hire? Well, we went over that. Justice, great news, should be back on next week, next Tuesday. So he's going to be back on we're going to do weekly. I just had a chance to talk with him today. Obviously had a couple weeks off, but we're going to get him back on, and he should be on weekly again every Tuesday. So really excited about that. Hello, Andy. I would love to hear your thoughts on the Packers realistically trading up in the draft for Abdul Carter, or Mason Graham, or Will Johnson, using Jair or Kenny Clark as trade chip. The second part of that is easy. There is nothing that Kenny Clark or Jair Alexander is going to get you in a trade to get up higher in the draft. Not of anything of note. If you get anything for Jair, you're probably looking at a late day 3 draft pick, 6th, 7th conditional round pick, something like that. That's not even going to get you a spot up in the draft. Kenny Clark, same exact thing. In fact, with the contract the way that it is, you're probably not really getting anything in return for Kenny at this point. You would probably have to release him outright, and you might have to release Jair outright as well. So using Kenny or Jair to move up, I literally don't think you could get to 22. Even if the team at 22 needed a player like either of them, I don't think you're getting up one spot by trading Jair or Kenny Clark or both of them. You're probably looking at some very late day 3 selections, if anything, for Jair, and that's probably it. So that second part is easy. As far as moving up, I think the Will Johnson one's interesting. I actually have had the opportunity to watch some Will Johnson. He's a polarizing prospect. I don't necessarily know that that's the kind of player that you want to go aggressively up for, because there are some questions with the long speed. There are some questions with the tackling. He's a really good player, really fun player. And I need to watch him more. I certainly can't speak to him in a super high level, but there are some polarizing thoughts about him. So I'm not sure that if you are going to go 23 to 15, that's what you want to do, or 23 to 10, that's what you want to do. And also, I don't think he falls to 23, but you never quite know either. So that's a more interesting one. I think there's a better chance that Abdul Carter goes 1 than that he goes, anywhere where Green Bay is going to have a chance to get him. Mason Graham's, probably going in the top 10, right? And do I think Green Bay could get up into 8, 9, 10 range if they really wanted to? Sure. But they'd have to have the right player for the right reasons. And I think you're probably going to hold your breath too long if you're thinking about it any sort of period of time. Usually in these situations, if you're looking at something realistic, my guess is they could get to, 15 to 18, somewhere in that range would be kind of like a realistic range for Green Bay to kind of try to trade into. But I don't think anything in that upper echelon of the draft. Goody's not going to give up, future first plus a third this year to get up into like pick 6 or something like that. Just don't see that happening. But certainly the last part, Jair or Kenny would not move the needle really much at all. All right, I do have to kind of start wrapping up here a little bit. So I'm going to try to go through these a little bit more lightning round. So I spent a lot of time on a couple of the questions. So my apologies for that. What do you think Mannion will bring to the table? It's a really, unfortunately, impossible question to answer, but I'm sure he's got some great ideas. He's obviously played the position in the past. I think he's had the opportunity to work with Matt LaFleur, with Sean McVay, and with some smart coaches, even as a player, right? So just that experience, the ability to have, that, hey, I've been there sort of moment. Not that Mannion played at a high level in the NFL, but I think it's going to be a really good match. And I think I think it's going to be a cool hire for Green Bay. I really do. I think if you're looking for a comparison, I think Josh McCown is somebody who's had a great success and is, I think, instrumental in what Sam Darnold did this past year and making that jump back. I think that's kind of what you're looking at and hoping for that Mannion can bring to the table. No, it's a tired topic, but both the Mahomes and Brady dynasties were indisputably buoyed. Oh, there we go. I was like, I didn't know if you were going booty there, Randy. I didn't know where you're going. Both the Patriots and Chiefs dynasties were buoyed by consistently beneficial reffing. From your memory, was it the same way for the Niners and Cowboys dynasties? Yeah, I struggle with that. I really do. I know that there's like the Tuck rule and things like that, which was legitimately a rule. It was a stupid rule, but it was a rule. I don't know. I mean, you had the Rice fumble that wasn't a fumble, and certainly there were some plays like that. I'll just put it this way. It's the last thing that I think about. There are going to be controversial calls. There are going to be bad calls. There are going to be calls that cost you games, and you just hope that it's not anything too egregious. I think that one, the penalty where, was it the Saints game where the player just got knocked out on the most clear and obvious pass interference penalty ever. And that was really like the difference in the game. Like, that's a brutal beat. Like, there's no getting over that. I don't think the Patriots or Chiefs have had something quite as egregious as that have helped them along the way. And if you had to ask me, was their dynasty more due to having super talented quarterbacks, really great coaches, some unbelievable players, and just being really fantastic teams? Or was it because they were buoyed by the referees? It is far more, to me, the fantastic quarterbacks, the great coaches, and the better teams. Listen, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the Patriots in their prime, the Chiefs in their prime. In order to win a Super Bowl, you have to have a level of luck, whether it's injury luck, whether it's ball bouncing your way luck, whether it's getting a right call in a right moment luck. I'm not a believer that anything's rigged, first and foremost. And I think sometimes you just got to get a little bit lucky along the way. And my guess is the team that wins the Super Bowl had a little bit of luck involved with it every single time. I don't specifically remember anything with the Cowboys or the 49ers, although I'm sure it's there. I also think that when we're hoping for teams to lose because we're sick of them, like the Patriots and the Chiefs, we're looking for ways for them to lose. And any call that goes in their favor immediately makes us more mad and makes us want to call it out even more. I don't like this last game, for example. Two plays that are these massive controversial plays for the most part. I don't believe that it was a drop on the catch, the simultaneous catch. That, to me, is a catch. I thought they ruled that 100% the right way. To me, there's no controversy there whatsoever. And the second one, I think, is just a victim of the situation, meaning you have a sea of humanity. It's a bad system where you've got two refs that are trying to gauge it with a naked eye from 25 yards away. They spotted it poorly. And then when you get into that replay review, we all can tell that he got the first down. But when you have to get into this situation where it has to be indisputable and you can't really see the ball and there's not a perfect down the line angle and knowing exactly where the yard marker is, it gets really hard to overturn it. And we see a play like that every week in the NFL that goes down exactly like that. Just happened to be in a big game in a big moment at the most inopportune time. And it was all going to come down to the most unscientific part about football, the spot of the ball from two guys who probably haven't had their eyes checked in 30 years that are trying to figure out in a mess of 22 players where to spot a ball. And they got it wrong. So to me, it is what it is. And it's the last thing I think about. And to me, I'm far more on the things that those teams have done to be successful more than, and yes, they got some lucky stuff along the way, as did pretty much every Super Bowl team through the history of time. Felt like this year was most of the elite running backs were a big part of the best teams, while the elite wide receivers were at home in the playoffs. Are elite wide receivers really important, or is a top 20 good enough? This is one of those, just kind of as a really quick, is there's no perfect calculus for this. I will say in the past, premier running backs have not paid dividends for teams. This year, it had a little bit more. Other times, premium wide receivers have paid dividends. This year, it hasn't as much. But, the biggest thing is get great quarterback play, put as many good players on the teams, build a good defense, and you're going to have a really great chance to win. But there's no perfect formula. You just got to hope that you can put the right team together that clicks at the right time, gets a little bit of that luck, gets a call to go your way, and you can peak at the right time and make a run at it. But more than anything, get that premium quarterback, and that's going to give you the best chance to win. Everything else is just trying to get in and accumulate as many good players as possible. My first members only event. Happy to support. Happy to be here. Go Pack Go. Steward, I appreciate that a ton. And fantastic name too. Steward Sandstorm is up there in the upper echelon of Pack-A-Day member names. Tucker Kraft is great and one of my favorites, and we'll get to his level shortly. But after Jones left, Kenny epitomizes Packer for me. Love that. Love that. I'm assuming the defensive position coaches are mainly hired based on who Hafley wants to fill that position, right? Or is it still LaFleur? I'm sure it's collaborative. My guess is there are like LaFleur, Hafley, and others will be involved in that process as well. So Hafley might have the final say. I don't know. Maybe that's not even true. Maybe LaFleur does, but my guess is it's extremely collaborative. Do you think Bo Melton has a chance to develop more? A bit disappointing after a strong finish to 2023. I think so, but I think he needs to play a little bit more and be able to be out there a bit more consistently. Still think there's a good player there, but this is going to be a really big season for Bo coming up. Do you think they only sign a defensive lineman in free agency or draft one in the top 100? Not both. I think they could do both. I very much think they could do both. It might be a little bit overkill with where the roster's at right now, but if Slayton walks, right, you're probably not basing too much on Colby Wooden at this point. There hasn't been enough upside there, and Kenny's probably gone the following season. Davante Wyatt has a fifth-year option coming up, which I'm not sure what they do. So, like, you could look at a world in which Carl Brooks is the only one that's on this team right now that's under contract in 2026. And, like, even that's, like, not a complete 100% given. I love Carl Brooks, but this is kind of a big year for him, too. So I think absolutely defensive tackle, they could sign somebody and draft somebody. Defensive end, I don't think you're basing anything off of Aaron Mosby or even Brenton Cox quite yet. Enigbari was a disappointment this past year. LVN hasn't taken a jump. And Rashawn Gary, at some point, you're going to probably look at that contract too. So I think they could sign somebody, and I think they could still draft somebody after that. I agree with your sentiments on the process questions for Davante. Also agree I'm kind of good with our linebacker room. Got to resign either McDuffie or Wilson for depth, though. Yeah, I think they can sign one of those. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think Hopper, Cooper, and Quay are going to be the three primary ones next year, and then they'll add some depth and probably bring one of those guys back, and then probably add somebody via the draft as well. Good always seems to double down on a position via free agency in the draft. Corner. Definitely corner. Do you still believe in Rob Domofsky's report last year that Green Bay wants to move Tom to center? It would make sense. So just to kind of go back to Domofsky's report, it wasn't that they wanted to move him to center. It was that they felt he could be a Hall of Fame center, an all-pro guard, and a great tackle. So it just felt like they thought his highest upside was maybe at center, but he's clearly been great at tackle. My guess is he's not going to be better at center than what he is at right tackle right now. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think they ever necessarily wanted to move him. They just felt like if they ever did move him to guard or center, there was maybe even more upside there than he was at tackle. Yes, there you go. Good job, King Kermit. Walker also had a bit of a rougher season than I expected, and I don't know how I feel about Morgan as a full-time tackle. Yeah, so offensive line, very, very key position to build some depth and some competition there. Best five out there, if they truly believe that they can be a Hall of Fame center, they could put him there and test out the line. Yeah, maybe. But again, I think he's just played so well at tackle and is like, you don't know, right, until you get him there. And he's already a really great right tackle. So, like, I don't think you want to mess with it too much at this point. Yeah, it makes tackle less as well. Don't think you move Tom. I agree. Bill, I agree. I'm very curious what that final call to action sense of urgency looks like, because I think Goody does need to lead by example somewhat if that's what his call to action is going to be. Jenkins would be better at center. No, Morgan is more comfortable on the left than on the right. I think that could be the case, but I trust Green Bay to ultimately make that decision. I know. I loved Christian Gonzalez in that draft, and he's been really good. Yes, Morgan played left guard and right guard. Jenkins could play center. Like, they're going to have a lot of options, and I think that's the beautiful thing. Even after all the knowledge that team has of a player, as Wef Spoff like to say, it's still a complete crapshoot as to whether or not the player will be good. A lot of variables that go into it. It is the most unscientific way of doing, or like results driven thing ever. And you're just kind of praying and hoping for the best when you go and draft someone. Ryan hasn't left the right guard spot his whole NFL career. That's not totally true. He practiced a lot at center in camp. He got some snaps at center this past season, and he did play at left guard in the past as well, if I remember correctly. Yeah, either way, he's practiced left guard, center, and right guard a ton. So that's, again, not entirely true. Snaps by position. In this past year, it's not like a ton, right? But he actually played 9 snaps at center, 7 at left guard this past season. 2023, he played 16 snaps at left guard. 2022, he didn't play any snaps. And then I have to go back and look at college. But he has had a handful of snaps at left guard and center as well. And he's practiced it quite a bit. Oh, Ben beat me to it. I'd also say that Wes Mike Vick helped grow my knowledge, level-headedness of the game. And now you two, a certain other Packers podcaster, not as much. Yeah, those guys are awesome. I can't speak to Vic. I never really followed Vic and never met him. But Wes and Mike are phenomenal human beings and a great, you can't ask for anything, any two people that'd be better covering the Packers for Packers.com. They're both phenomenal humans and love reading their work. Congrats. You are the new GM of the Packers. You're welcome. What would be your price to trade Malik Willis? Top 100 pick. Top 100 pick, I'll take it. Actually, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to his agent and see if I can get a 2-year, $10 million deal. We're going to rip up this deal, and then I'm going to go and see if we can get a 2-year, $10 million deal done. I think that actually makes sense for both sides. It prolongs Willis's free agency a year, but it'll still be 28, and it gets him $10 million guaranteed over the next 2 years, where right now he's only set to make $1.4 million this year, and the odds that he gets $8.6 million next year are almost none. But if I'm Green Bay, I love him for a 2-year, $10 million deal as a backup. So I'm going to go to that first and say, hey, can we get a 2-year, $10 million deal done? If the answer is yes, I'm going to do that, and I'm not going to trade him. Then I shouldn't say that. If I'm getting offered a first or something like that, of course I'm going to trade him. But assuming that's not available, I'm going to go and try to do that. If not, top 100 pick is what it's going to take to get him off my hands. Stop rooting against the NFC North teams about 5 years ago. I want them to be good because it will force us to be better, and beating the Bears with Ben Johnson and Caleb will feel so much sweeter. I don't think you're fine by thinking that, by the way. I don't think it's perfect one way or the other. They faced unbelievable competition with Detroit and Minnesota this year in the regular season. They lost in the first round of the playoffs. There's been other seasons where the division hasn't been good, and it's been able to get them into the playoffs, and they can make a run and that they don't get to the championship, right? In the 2010, when they won it, they got to face Chicago in the championship game. Those two teams pushed each other, I think, to some extent. 96, I don't think there was anyone of any severe significance in the division, and they won a championship. I just think winning a Super Bowl is insanely hard. I think some of like these very little variables play almost no factor into it whatsoever. If you want better competition in the division, great. I don't mind it, but I kind of just want to make sure I'm getting in the dance. So if all three other teams are 0-18 or, whatever, they can't be obviously, but or 0-17, I'm fine with it because I just want Green Bay to get in the dance and then kind of go from there. But I understand the overall thought process, but I honestly don't think those things play that much of a factor either way. Ross Sikkema and Mike Renner have done levels for my draft knowledge. All three very, very smart people. Love those guys. Do you think we draft a quarterback? I think if the right quarterback is there and they like a quarterback, they absolutely will. You're probably talking 3rd to 7th round, nothing 1st or 2nd, but anyone rounds 3 through 7 that they like and they think can be competition for Sean Clifford as that number 3 right now, and potential backup next year when Malik likely leaves, I think they'll absolutely consider it. Appreciate your knowledge and candor about the Packers. Don, you were more than welcome. Thanks for the kind words. Do you think we draft? Oh, there we go. And yes, if they did draft a quarterback, Clifford would be gone. I'd love to just take a break from quarterback this draft and go get one next draft. To me, if you can find one that you like, first of all, if you find one you like, you always take them, period, end of story. But if you find one that you think is a good developmental player and he's the best player on your board, or at least in that vicinity, and you can take him now so that he's ready to be the backup in 2026, totally cool with that. I think that would be worthwhile in that situation. I think you said in the past, maybe there's, developmental. Yep. To be fair on the ref topic, it's different when they're winning 1-score games every week with the questionable calls always in their favor every week. Just saying, totally get it. Not saying it's enjoyable, King Kermit. Not saying it's enjoyable. KC fans will gloat and say there was still time, but I just want to see how the game ended. Yeah, totally agree. Never forget Holland and JOK were available and Green Bay drafted Eric Stokes. Yeah, I get it, Arnaldo. And I think I care less about those little things than that they just have to be better at drafting premium selections. You can do that for every team on every pick in every draft of like, they pick this guy, look at who was available 10 picks later. Every time. You do it every single time. So you're going to get some right here and there. You're just trying to get 3 really good players in every draft. And you need to kind of get, ideally you can't go 5 drafts in a row where your first rounder is not getting that ROI for you. So I don't really care the individual ones. We can talk the TJ Watts, the Creed Humphreys. Every team can do that. Every single one on every pick, more often than not. So I care less about that. I just need Green Bay to be better on the whole. They don't need to get every pick right. That's never going to happen. Love the part of the stream where you get to the combos we've had amongst ourselves. Yeah, it's always fun. I try to get through everything. Which division will be the first to have all 4 teams make the playoffs? NFC North or AFC West? I don't think it'll ever happen. Never is probably strong, but you just end up with like, you end up, sort of siphoning from each other at that point. You kind of need a situation where you all go, 2-2 in the division and then just nuke everyone else. So I guess maybe theoretically it could happen, but man, it's really, really tough to get the formula to work out where all 4 teams make it and are all good at the same time. But yeah, I'm going to say probably doesn't happen. There you go. King Kermit's on the same page. Thoughts on NFL officiating? Not saying it's scripted, but how can it be fixed? Been an NFL fan for a long time and it's frustrating. I appreciate you, Andy. Yeah, it definitely needs to get better. Here's what I will tell you. Until there's any reason for the NFL to make it better, what are they going to care? Think of it this way. Major League Baseball, FIFA, or the Premier League, all the soccer leagues, NBA, NFL, NHL, any other sport that you love, college basketball. We have the best technology. We have everything that we can to go back and do instant replay. For those of you who were alive before instant replay, is it any less controversial now than it was then? The answer is unequivocally no. In fact, it's arguably more controversial now because you can slow it down frame by frame, and it still feels like we're getting stuff wrong. It's more maddening. Like before, at least it was like, well, human error. All right, whatever. But the point being here is the NFL could add 5 more officials to the field, make them full-time, make everything reviewable, and guess what's going to happen? It will be as controversial as ever, if not more controversial. There is no system that's going to work to make it better. And it just raises the bar and makes it so that now anything that they get wrong is like controversial. So there is going to be that element of football forever and always, and baseball and hockey and college basketball and soccer and everything else. It is always, always, always going to be that way. And I think the sooner that you just kind of embrace it and say, all right, got to live with that one. And hopefully it goes in your favor a little bit more than what it doesn't. Not saying that is not frustrating, but it's always going to be that way. There's always going to be that controversy. And here's the thing. The NFL has no incentive to go and add full-time referees or add more officials or do anything else different because, one, they know, just like we just talked about, it's only going to still be more controversial or as controversial. No matter what, it's always going to be that way. And 2, you and I are tuning in every week no matter what. They've had some of the most glaring errors in NFL history, like the one we talked about with the Saints where the dude gets knocked out on the pass interference play. We all watch the next week. The ratings continue to go up. There's more drama. There's more to talk about. We talk about it more when there's that drama on the field. So until people are like, that's it, I'm done, I'm out of here, I don't want anything to do with this anymore, which is probably never going to happen. There's no incentive for them to do it. And like I said, even if they did, my guess is it gets as controversial, if not more controversial, with even more eyes on it. So just embrace it. And that's all I got for you. Embrace it, ignore it, bury your head in the sand, do what you need to do. Try to ignore that aspect of the game and just enjoy the huge plays and hope it doesn't screw your team over all that much. Depends on if the NFC West AFC West is going to be really interesting with those coaches. Should be some really fun games next year. What's the most realistic best case scenario this offseason for you? I don't know yet, Ian. I will put an episode together. It'll be like, my final Packers shopping or wish list or something like that. I'm starting to get inklings of it now, but I'll put that together eventually. Promise. Stokes' rookie season showed the potential. He just never developed post-injury. Yes, but his rookie season was fine. He was fine. He was good to fine. But remember, we liked Demarius Randall his rookie season too. Darnell Savage looked really good his rookie season. There were flashes from Josh Jackson his rookie season. The one time where we still give a little bit of accident forgiveness is the rookie season. And there was some of that with Eric Stokes too. Second year comes, and now you have expectations. And if you don't reach those, it's very hot in the kitchen very fast. And Stokes was brutal in year 2 before the injuries even hit. Then you've got a year and a half of injuries, a lot of rust, comes back this year, gets basically handed the starting job, does nothing with it, plays, I think, 1 snap in the final 2 games this year. It just never worked. So yeah, I think his best year in his career was very clearly his rookie season. I think he was a fun player. I think we probably forgave a little bit that year because he was a rookie. And then once you lose those rookie glasses and you're expected to be a pro, things escalate very quickly. And I think once we saw him without the rookie glasses on, we saw maybe a little bit more of the real Eric Stokes, and it just did not go well. Let's see. I'm good with Chicago not getting into the playoffs with the other 3 getting in consistently. Fair. NFL is king and they know it for sure. Josh Jacobs or Xavier McKinney, take your pick. Jacobs has the higher grade for me, but offensive players and especially running backs have a propensity to have the higher grades. So take your pick between Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney. It's one of them for sure. And to me, it's just Jacobs is the offensive MVP. McKinney was the defensive MVP. Thank you, King Kermit. I appreciate that. Yeah, I love it. I don't know if it's genius, but I really like him as a free agent target for Green Bay. Appreciate that, King Kermit. Yeah, Jacobs X half is a good one as well, but MVP is player, so can't do halfly. But most valuable personnel, maybe you could make that argument for half. But Jacobs on offense, McKinney on defense. All right, I do got to get out of here, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you guys a ton. Great chat today. Really, really fun one. I will talk to you guys very, very soon. I'll be here tomorrow for happy hour. And of course, new episode tomorrow. Ross might have a daily draft up tonight still, so keep an eye out for that. But until next time, and as always, enjoy your night and go Pack Go, everyone.